10 minutes ago, inside a committee room that feels like a pressure cooker, Rep. Jasmine Crockett did something that just detonated the entire narrative around Congress's Epstein subpoena fight. Not with a stunt, not with a slogan, with a lawyer's framing, and a single word that hit like a gavel: hypocrisy. I'm standing along the wall, shoulder to shoulder with staffers clutching folders, cameras locked in, reporters whispering into mics. I've covered hundreds of hearings. Most of them blur together. This one doesn't. This one has that sharp, metallic tension you only get when people realize the room is slipping out of their control. And right now, you can feel it. The kind of silence that isn't calm. It's loaded. Before we go any further, hit subscribe and tap the bell, because hearings like this move fast and the story changes by the hour. You do not want to miss what happens next. Here's the setup. The committee is fighting over subpoenas tied to the Epstein subject matter. What gets demanded, who gets demanded, and what happens when the subpoenaed party responds. Or doesn't. But the real battle isn't paperwork. It's power. Who gets labeled in contempt, who gets treated like an enemy, and who gets protected by the system's selective memory. Then Crockett leans in, calm, controlled, voice steady, but her eyes are doing that thing prosecutors do when they've already mapped the whole room. She starts almost quietly. She's been listening, and she's perplexed. And I'm telling you, when a lawyer says perplexed in a hearing, it's never confusion. It's a warning. She takes it back to her legal days. She doesn't posture. She builds a foundation. Subpoena law, contempt, compliance. And she drops the phrase that changes the temperature in the room: substantial compliance. You can see a few members shift in their seats. Pens pause. Staffers look up from laptops. Because substantial compliance is a legal concept that can wreck a political talking point. Crockett explains it like she's cross-examining the entire committee at once. When you're deciding contempt, you look at whether there were reasonable steps taken. Good faith efforts. Actions that look like someone trying to comply, even if it isn't perfect. She's telling them, in plain terms, if someone responded at all, that's not throwing the bird. That's not forget it. That's a form of compliance. And as she says it, I watch faces tighten, because she's not just making a point. She's setting a trap. Because the hearing isn't even done crafting the parameters of the subpoena. She points out they're still arguing what it even covers, whether it's limited to Epstein subject matter. So, how do you screen contempt when you're still drawing the lines? He paused. Not Crockett. The room. The room paused. And then, this is where it turns. Crockett pivots from legal theory to moral indictment. She says it directly. We are living in an age of hypocrisy. And she names a colleague being discussed, Mr. Perry, sitting in judgment of others. You can feel the ripple. It's subtle, but it's there. Like someone dropped a match and everyone just noticed the gas. Crockett says the public is getting annoyed because the hypocrisy is obvious. She says Mr. Perry still has an outstanding subpoena that was never complied with. That line lands hard, because it's not a vibe. It's an accusation about process, about standards, about whether this committee applies rules evenly or as a weapon. And the body language, it's instant. One member leans back, jaw clenched. Another looks down like the desk suddenly became fascinating. Staffers whisper to each other with that quick, panicked cadence, like they're trying to decide if the next move is defense or silence. Now Crockett presses again. Someone else had just talked about, we need to care for the victims. And Crockett does what veteran litigators do. She doesn't argue emotion. She interrogates inconsistency. She says she doesn't believe Mr. Perry even signed off on the discharge petition in the first place. And she frames it as potentially politically expedient behavior. Then she says a line that turns the air electric. I refuse to be a puppet. When she says it, she doesn't shout. She doesn't perform. She just holds the room with that righteous courtroom certainty, like she's daring anyone to say she's wrong. She lays out what she says Democrats often do: operate in goodwill, try to follow rules, follow law. And then she points outward, beyond the dais, beyond the room, toward the bigger system. She says we're living with an administration that does not care whether you agree or disagree. The effect inside the room is the same. She's forcing everyone to confront the accusation that the rules are not being applied equally. And at this moment, this is where you need to hit like. Not because you support one side, because the algorithm buries hearing coverage unless people engage. If you want the public record to be seen, you have to push it. Crockett brings it back to parity, fairness. She says, if you're going to subpoena, then subpoena in a way that doesn't look like gamesmanship. And then she says it, clean and blunt, two names that snap every camera operator to attention. She says people want to hear from President Clinton. And she adds that President Trump and President Clinton both had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. In that instant, the room changes. Not because of new evidence, because of the implications. Because she's pointing at the very thing everyone tries to avoid saying plainly in a hearing. The demand for accountability becomes suspicious when it's selective. She warns that it looks political, like someone can get away with everything. And she references the Supreme Court, framing how public perception has shifted toward immunity, impunity, and unequal consequence. And here's the part people at home don't see. When a member says something that broad in a cramped hearing room, staffers start doing silent math. What will clip? What will trend? What will become tomorrow's headline? Crockett says the rules are invoked only against political enemies. And she warns this is why the country is falling apart, because checks and balances don't work if enforcement is partisan. Her cadence speeds up. Sentences get shorter, sharper. It shouldn't matter party, wealth, race, immigration status. None of it. But she says it feels like the committee has a political agenda. And that's why everything goes off the rails. Then she goes even harder. She argues only love law enforcement when it's aimed at black, brown immigrants, that kind of folk, but didn't care about law enforcement on January 6. That is not a casual remark. That is a prosecutorial accusation about consistency. And you can see how some people react, tight smiles, frozen stares. The kind of face you make when you know you're being recorded and you don't want to give the clip what it wants. She says Democrats keep doing the right thing, apply rules equally, then y'all play in our faces and apply it only to one side. And now she does the most dangerous thing you can do in a hearing. She demands a commitment, not a talking point, a commitment on the record. She addresses the chair directly, calling this probably the most important committee in this Congress, especially in a moment where people are concerned about corruption. She addresses the chair directly, calling this probably the most important committee in this Congress, especially in a moment where people are concerned about corruption. Will you promise to do whatever is right and follow the evidence, no matter who is on the other side of that evidence? He paused. A long pause, the kind of pause where you can hear fabric shift as someone breathes. Because that's the moment. If the chair says yes, it's a pledge that can be used later when the politics get inconvenient. If the chair hedges, it confirms her point. And then, finally, the chair answers, yes. But he doesn't stop there. He starts laying out what they did. He says that's why he subpoenaed the estate. And he says something important, almost defensive. Nobody knew what was in the estate documents. And he says he, without hesitation, subpoenaed the estate. Then he says they subpoenaed the Department of Justice. And that's where, he says, they got the birthday letter. The words birthday letter are like a spark. Heads tilt. People scribble. Because now the hearing is pointing at documents, real artifacts, things that can be requested, traced, fought over, litigated. The chair continues, almost rapid fire now, like he realizes this answer has to sound decisive. Subpoena. Subpoena, right? Okay. We got the evidence. But we can't get evidence, and then not follow up on the evidence we actually get. And right there is the hinge of the entire fight. Because Crockett's point is about equal standards and substantial compliance. The chair's point is, once evidence lands on the table, you can't pretend you didn't see it. This is what the public senses, and what Washington often tries to suppress. Accountability is messy, and once subpoenas start flying, nobody controls where they land. Now listen, if you've made it this far, you must watch to the end because the real story isn't just what they said. It's what this exchange forces next. Follow-up subpoenas, fights over scope, and a new standard the chair just put on the record. Follow the evidence, no matter who. And that's why the hearing room feels different now. Because that, yes, can boomerang. It can come back when the next name is inconvenient. When the next document points somewhere nobody wants it to. You can almost see it in the posture. Members sitting straighter. Staffers scanning messages. Phones buzzing under the desk. That quiet panic of, what else is in there? Outside this room, The fallout writes itself. First, the subpoena fight becomes a hypocrisy fight. Who complied? Who didn't? Who gets punished? Second, the Epstein subject matter becomes a scope fight. What's relevant? What's political? What's evidence? So the chair just tied the committee to the estate documents and DOJ material, meaning every next step will be judged against the promise made on the record. And yes, this is where the trending hashtags come from. This is where clips get cut. This is where narratives get weaponized. So here's my question to you, and I want you to answer it in the comments. Who do you think is really driving the subpoena strategy here? People chasing facts? Or people chasing headlines? Drop your take below. I read the top comments, and they shape what we cover next. And do me a favor, share this. Send it to everyone who keeps saying Congress never holds anyone accountable. Pressure only works when sunlight stays on the process. Now, as someone who's watched Washington for decades, here's what I know. The most damaging scandals aren't born from a single document. They're born from inconsistency. One rule for allies, another for enemies. One subpoena treated like sacred law, another treated like a suggestion. And today, Crockett didn't just argue politics. She put a legal standard on the table. Substantial compliance, good faith, reasonable steps, and equal application. Then she forced the chair to say the words out loud. Follow the evidence no matter who. That's the line that haunts committees later. Because once you say it, you can't unsay it. So if you want the next chapter, the follow-ups, the document fights, the next hearing blow-up, hit subscribe and ring the bell right now. And on your screen, watch the previous episode because this subpoena war didn't start today, and it won't end today. Final thought, and I mean this. This is no longer theory. This is documented process on the record. The only question is whether Congress applies it equally or proves Crockett right.